shift always starts small, a flicker of unease, a missed text, a strange look, a headline. The mind begins to spin. What if I fail? What if they leave? What if something goes wrong? Worry doesn't shout. It whispers. Quietly. Relentlessly. It sounds like logic, but it feels like drowning. And the strangest part? We believe it helps. That by worrying enough we can prevent disaster. That somehow anxiety is a form of protection. But the truth is more disturbing. The more we worry, the less control we actually have. Because worry isn't foresight. It's fiction. The mind, when left unchecked, becomes a theater of fear. It projects scenes that haven't happened, might never happen, and convinces us they're real, that we're simply being careful, responsible, adult. But under the surface, something else is happening. We're becoming prisoners of our own imagination. Modern neuroscience tells us the brain can't always distinguish between real threats and imagined ones. The same circuits light up. The same hormones flood the body. Stress becomes a habit, and over time, our baseline shifts. Peace feels foreign. Silence becomes threatening. This is the trap. We worry to feel safe, but the worry is what's killing our safety. And centuries before dopamine receptors and MRI scans, one man saw it all. Michel de Montaigne, French nobleman, philosopher, observer of the soul. In the 16th century, surrounded by war, plague, and political chaos, he stepped back from the world and started writing. Not for fame, not for status, but because something inside him refused to obey fear. "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes," he wrote, "most of which never happened." Centuries later, those words still hit, like a thunderclap, because they expose a pattern most of us never question. That much of our suffering isn't caused by the world, but by the mind anticipating the world. Montaigne didn't write doctrines. He wrote doubts. He didn't pose as a master. He confessed his confusion, and in doing so, he discovered something radical. The act of worrying, far from preparing us for life, actually removes us from it. It clouds our decisions, narrows our perspective, turns the ordinary into the unbearable. We mistake motion for progress, thought for clarity, fear for awareness. But what if letting go of control, of the obsessive need to fix, to plan, to know, wasn't recklessness, but freedom? That's what Montaigne found in his solitude. Not answers, but a different kind of strength. The strength to say, I don't know, I can't control it, and that's okay. In a world that rewards constant vigilance, this mindset feels dangerous, even irresponsible. But look closely. When has worry ever saved you from the thing you feared? When did the endless thinking actually lead to peace? The paradox is clear. The moment we stop worrying is the moment everything starts to go well, not because the world changes, but because we do. The storm continues. But we are no longer the wind, no longer the leaf, just the witness. And from that place, decisions become clearer, life less reactive, suffering lighter. This isn't optimism, it's realism. A realism Montaigne lived, not as an idea, but as a practice. And it begins here, by seeing worry for what it really is, a story, a habit, a prison with the door already open. He wasn't a monk, not a guru, not a man in search of enlightenment. Michel de Montaigne was a politician, a nobleman, a landowner. He lived in a chateau. He dealt with taxes, law, bureaucracy. His life was ordinary, until it wasn't. In the 1560s, his world began to collapse. France was tearing itself apart. Religious wars, civil unrest, the plague moving silently from town to town. Friends died, family members disappeared, and Montaigne, by all appearances, shut down. He walked away from it all. He retreated to a tower on his estate, not to hide, but to reflect. He covered the walls of his study with quotes from ancient philosophers, and began to write. not about the world outside, but the world within. His essays weren't books, they were explorations. He examined his own fear, boredom, lust, illness, grief, not to solve them, but to understand them. He wasn't trying to be wise, he was trying to be honest. Montaigne believed that most people wear masks, not to deceive others, but to deceive themselves. So he stripped everything away. The pride, the certainty, the pretense of control, and what remained was startlingly human. He confessed to cowardice, to laziness, to moments of rage, despair, and confusion. But in doing so, he found a kind of clarity that most never reach, not because it's hidden, but because it's uncomfortable. In his solitude, he didn't escape the world. He finally saw it, without distortion, without illusion. And what he saw was this: most suffering comes not from events, but from our refusal to accept them, not from life itself, but from the mind's refusal to let life be what it is. He watched the plague wipe out entire communities. He nearly died in a horseback accident. He faced political exile, illness, loss. Yet in his writings you rarely find panic. Instead, you find curiosity. Each man bears the whole form of the human condition, he wrote. To understand yourself deeply is to understand others completely. His tower became more than a study. It became a laboratory for the self, not the ego, not the persona, but the trembling, breathing, observing awareness behind it all. And in that quiet, he discovered something modern minds have nearly forgotten. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to know everything. You only have to see clearly. And stop pretending that you're not afraid. This was Montaigne's power. Not invincibility, but radical vulnerability. He made no promises, no systems, no manifestos, just questions. And from those questions, a different kind of wisdom emerged, one that wasn't obsessed with control, but with connection. Not with domination, but with observation. He became a philosopher not through study, but through suffering. Not through theory, but through introspection. He didn't run from the chaos of the world. He let it echo inside him, and listened carefully. And from that listening, he understood something that now seems almost revolutionary. Sometimes the most powerful act is to pause, to step back, to retreat, not in fear, but in order to see, not as an escape from responsibility, but as a return to reality. He wrote not to impress, but to investigate. He was, in many ways, the first person to write in public. What most people are afraid to admit, even in private, that we are not in control, that we are terrified, that we are trying to make sense of a world that doesn't owe us clarity. And somehow, through that surrender, he found peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of truth. We like to believe we're in control, that with enough planning, enough vigilance, we can outmaneuver the chaos, that we can bend the world to our expectations. It's comforting. And it's a lie. Worry is born from this illusion, the belief that if we think hard enough, prepare deeply enough, we can eliminate all risk. But the truth is this: control is mostly cosmetic. A mask we put on to cover our fear. We don't worry because something is wrong. We worry because we think we should be able to stop something from going wrong. And when we can't, the mind starts to panic. It fills in the gaps. It imagines disasters. It simulates worst-case scenarios over and over again, as if suffering in advance might somehow reduce the blow. But Montaigne didn't buy into this illusion. He saw it for what it was: a story we tell ourselves to avoid facing the reality that life is uncertain, and always will be. He didn't try to escape uncertainty, he made peace with it. Modern psychology has a name for this pattern: catastrophizing. It's what happens when the brain jumps from a single event, a missed call, a slow email response, a strange cough, to a full-blown disaster. The mind builds a staircase of fear, each thought more extreme than the last. And before we know it, we're standing at the top of a nightmare we built ourselves. The brain is a prediction machine. It wants patterns. It wants cause and effect. But when it doesn't get certainty, it manufactures it, even if it's fictional. Even if it hurts us. And what's worse, we reward it. We treat worry as virtue, as responsibility, as care. But Montaigne asked a harder question. Is worry actually helping you? Are your fears keeping you safe, or are they keeping you small? Psychologists call it the locus of control. Some people believe they can influence their lives through effort. That's an internal locus. Others believe their lives are controlled by external forces, an external locus. But chronic worry distorts both. It convinces you that everything depends on you, and that nothing you do will ever be enough. You live suspended between over-responsibility and helplessness. And here's the twist. When you finally let go, when you stop trying to solve every possible problem in advance, you often become more capable because clarity replaces chaos, presence replaces panic. This is what Montaigne found, that the moment he accepted uncertainty, life became less threatening. Not safer, just less hostile. He no longer saw the future as a battleground. He stopped rehearsing tragedies that hadn't happened, and in doing so, he gained the one thing worry always promises, but never delivers: peace of mind. Not because the world stopped being dangerous, but because his relationship to it changed. The great irony is that we think our thinking protects us, but it's often what imprisons us. Montaigne realized that surrender wasn't weakness. It was a different kind of intelligence. An intelligence that doesn't fight uncertainty, but flows with it. We now call this idea many names. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of fate. The Taoists called it wu wei, effortless action. Modern psychology calls it acceptance. But Montaigne didn't need a label. He had a pen, a tower, and time. And through them, he saw something that most of us overlook. That when we stop chasing control, we gain perspective. And when we stop rehearsing failure, we open space for something strange to happen. Success, peace, creativity, even joy. Not because we forced it, but because we finally got out of its way. Worry narrows the lens. Surrender widens it. When you worry, you contract. When you let go, you expand. And expansion of thought, of feeling, of presence is where real life begins. This isn't about passivity. It's not about giving up. It's about giving up the illusion that you're in control of everything, because you're not, and you never were. But that's not a tragedy. That's liberation. There's a strange truth that hides in plain sight. The more tightly we grip, the more things slip through our fingers. It's true in relationships. In careers, in life, we chase, we cling, we plan, we prepare. We try to force the world into a shape it was never meant to hold. And all the while, we call it strength. But Montaigne discovered something else, something quieter, more difficult. That real strength, real sovereignty begins the moment you let go. Not out of laziness, not out of defeat, but from a deeper recognition. That control is not power. Presence is. We think that by holding on, we're keeping things stable, but we're actually creating resistance, friction, tension between what is and what we demand it be. Montaigne didn't reject responsibility. He was a magistrate, a mayor, a mediator in brutal civil wars. But he understood something modern minds often forget. There's a difference between taking action and trying to control the outcome. One is rooted in clarity, the other in fear. Surrender isn't the absence of action. It's the absence of attachment. To result, we confuse letting go with passivity. But Montaigne knew better. He lived in a time of disease and religious slaughter. He was no stranger to death, injustice, absurdity. And still, he chose surrender. Not because it was easier, but because it was honest. He realized the only true power we ever hold is over our own perception, our own response, our own relationship with reality. And when you stop fighting reality, you stop being its victim. This idea is radical because it reverses everything. In modern life, we're taught that worry is noble, that obsession is dedication, that if we let go, things will fall apart. But what if it's the opposite? What if the obsession is the collapse? What if the worry is the instability? Psychologists today call it psychological flexibility, the ability to move with reality instead of against it. People who are psychologically flexible tend to be more resilient, more adaptive, less anxious, because they don't need life to obey their rules. They respond instead of react. They flow instead of force. Montaigne didn't have MRI scans or behavior studies. He had observation. And from it, he learned a powerful distinction. Surrender isn't submission. It's sovereignty. It's not bowing down to life. It's standing still in the middle of the storm and refusing to be ruled by fear. And here's where it gets more subtle. Surrender doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You still love. You still work. You still show up. But you stop pretending that your anxiety is what holds everything together. You stop acting like the universe is waiting on your stress to function properly. You realize something simpler, more elegant, that life moves whether you panic or not. And that peace is not found in certainty, but in presence, in being exactly where you are, as you are, without needing it to be different. This is what Montaigne practiced. Every time he sat down to write, he let go of performance. He let go of answers. He let go of who he thought he was supposed to be. And in that empty space, something real emerged. Not perfection, not enlightenment, just truth. And that was enough. He once wrote, "He who fears he shall suffer already suffers what he fears." This is the core of surrender. You let go not to escape pain, but to stop doubling it. You stop adding suffering to pain, drama to discomfort, control to chaos. And what's left isn't apathy. It's a deeper kind of engagement, one where you stop chasing life and start meeting it moment by moment, without the armor, without the script. Because the truth is, most of the time it's not the situation that breaks us. It's the story we tell about it, the meaning we force onto it. Surrender breaks that pattern. It says, maybe I don't need to know. Maybe I don't need to solve. Maybe I just need to see, clearly, what's in front of me. And that kind of seeing, that's freedom. Not the freedom of control, but the freedom from it. Montaigne didn't preach this. He lived it, wrote it, embodied it, and the result wasn't passivity. It was power, the power to remain centered when the world collapses, to stay human when others lose themselves, to find meaning without needing to manufacture it. In a world that rewards frenzy, surrender is rebellion. And in a mind that runs on fear, letting go is the first act of true self-possession. Montaigne lived in a time of plague, war, and political collapse. We live in a time of push notifications. Same fear, different face. But unlike Montaigne, we're never alone. We carry the noise with us, everywhere, in our pockets, on our wrists, in our bedrooms. We are saturated with headlines, alerts, algorithms. And what are they selling? Fear, outrage, urgency. Every day, a new catastrophe, a new crisis, a new reason to panic. The world didn't get more dangerous. It just got louder. Montaigne warned about this, centuries before screens, that humans are easily manipulated by fear, that we mistake intensity for truth, and that the mind, when unguarded, becomes a factory of unnecessary suffering. He didn't have TikTok, or breaking news banners, or the endless scroll of synthetic emergencies, but he saw what fear does to people, how it narrows their thinking, closes their hearts, turns them into puppets. He watched entire communities burn each other alive because someone told them God demanded it. Today, we're more civilized. We cancel instead of burn. We don't exile people physically. We do it algorithmically, but the psychology is the same. A scared mind is an obedient mind. A distracted mind is a controllable one. We are trained, without knowing it, to live in a state of hypervigilance, always scanning, always scrolling, always bracing for impact, and we call that awareness. But Montaigne would have called it what it really is: manufactured anxiety. A world that keeps you afraid so you never ask real questions. What if your fear isn't yours? What if your worry is a product, designed, packaged, delivered, by people who benefit from your exhaustion, by industries that profit from your panic? The news doesn't inform, it activates. The algorithm doesn't enlighten, it provokes. Because when you're afraid, you engage. When you're anxious, you return. And when you're overwhelmed, you don't. Think, you react. That's the currency of the modern age, your attention, bought and sold by the second. Montaigne understood this before the digital age, that the mind needs silence, not just to rest, but to see. Without stillness, you don't reflect. Without reflection, you don't question. Without questioning, you obey. He retreated to his tower not to escape the world, but to understand it. What's our tower now? Where is our space to think? Because when every moment is filled, there's no room for clarity. This is what makes Montaigne so urgent. Today, he reminds us that not every thought is true, not every feeling is useful, and not every crisis is real, that most of what consumes us was engineered to do just that: consume us. You turn off your phone, and the apocalypse disappears, not because it's over, but because it was never fully yours to begin with. The media doesn't want nuance, it wants reaction. The system doesn't need you calm, it needs you compliant. And fear is the shortcut. Fear keeps you busy, it keeps you loud, and most importantly, it keeps you afraid of being still. Because stillness is where you see, and seeing is dangerous. Seeing through the illusion, through the panic, through the noise. Montaigne practiced this seeing, and in doing so, he made himself harder to control. He trusted his inner world more than the outer noise, not because he was naive, but because he understood the mind's traps. He didn't escape fear. He learned to doubt it, to hold it, to examine it, to ask, is this mine or was it planted? That question, right now, might be the most important one we can ask, because if you don't guard your attention, someone else will use it. If you don't guide your mind, someone else will program it. Montaigne's essays are filled with uncertainty, with questions, with contradictions, but that's what makes them powerful. He didn't pretend to know. He didn't need to win. He just wanted to understand. And that, in today's world, is almost revolutionary. A mind that isn't trying to conquer, but to comprehend. That isn't chasing status, but seeking insight that doesn't react, but reflects. That's what makes Montaigne relevant. Not because he had answers, but because he had the courage to stop and think. And in doing so, he found something most of us are still chasing: freedom. Not freedom from fear, but freedom from believing every fear. Not freedom from the world, but freedom within it. Imagine for a moment what it means to truly stop worrying. Not just to silence the noise for a minute, but to let go of the very habit of worry itself. Montaigne calls this the paradox of surrender. The moment you stop fighting what you cannot. Control is the moment everything starts to go well. It's a strange idea, because we've been taught that control is strength, that worry is vigilance, that anxiety means you care. But Montaigne invites us to consider the opposite, that the tight grip of fear chokes possibility, that the act of letting go opens doors no amount of planning ever could. He knew that surrender is not weakness. It's a courageous stance, a refusal to be enslaved by your own mind. When you stop worrying about what might happen, you free yourself to notice what is happening. You move from paralysis into flow, from reaction into choice. Because worry, at its core, is a prison made of imagined futures, a maze built from what-ifs, and every what-if is a cell door locked from the inside. When you let go, you step out of the maze. You face uncertainty not as a threat, but as a space of possibility. It's here that life truly begins, not in the endless preparation, not in the desperate clinging to control, but in the acceptance of mystery. Montaigne writes, "To philosophize is to learn how to die, not because he was morbid, but because he understood that life's impermanence is the source of its meaning. 2. Accept that you will die, not just physically, but in your assumptions, your plans, your expectations, is to be reborn every day. When you surrender worry, you surrender false certainty. You surrender the illusion that you're separate from life's flow. And paradoxically, that surrender brings sovereignty, because you no longer waste energy resisting the inevitable. You conserve it for living fully. This is why Montaigne's message echoes across centuries, because it's not just about how to think, it's about how to be present, how to be vulnerable, how to be real. This is the power of stopping worry. It doesn't solve your problems. It changes your relationship to them. It allows you to meet difficulty without panic, to meet failure without collapse, to meet loss without despair, because the ground beneath you is not control. It's acceptance, and from acceptance grows resilience. From surrender, strength. In the quiet spaces Montaigne found, he glimpsed the true nature of freedom. Not freedom to dictate life's terms, but freedom to dance with them. The philosopher's tower becomes not a refuge from the world, but a place to face it without illusion, to look into the abyss and not blink, and to realize the abyss is not empty, it is alive. It contains possibility, change, transformation. When you stop worrying, you stop shrinking. You expand. You meet life as it is, in all its chaos, beauty, and mystery. And in that meeting, everything begins to go well. That's the paradox Michel de Montaigne invites us to embrace. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, when you stop worrying about what you cannot change, you find the power to live fully, and in that power you find peace. In a world that never stops shouting, where every moment demands your fear, your outrage, your panic. Michel de Montaigne's voice arrives like a whisper, a call to slow down, to step back, to breathe. He reminds us that beneath the noise, beneath the chaos, lies a simple truth. Peace is not found by wrestling with the uncontrollable, but by learning to live alongside. To stop worrying is not to stop caring. It is to reclaim your mind from the endless storm of what-ifs and maybes. Montaigne teaches us that surrender is not defeat. It is freedom, a freedom born not from controlling life, but from embracing it fully, in all its uncertainty and wonder. When the world demands your fear, remember Montaigne's whisper. Let go, stop worrying, and watch everything begin to go well.